It is really easy to waste time and money on books that you don't need. In this video, I'm going to cover some of the basics that are really good resources without really just breaking the bank. So there are a couple slots that you need to fill when it comes to a theological library. We're going to start with just some basics, and then in future videos, we're going to build onto that from there. So you're going to need a Bible dictionary. You're going to need some biblical theology, Old Testament and New Testament. You're going to need some Old Testament commentaries and some New Testament commentaries. You're going to need some original languages. You're going to need some historical background and context. And you're going to need some systematic theology. Now, I know that already sounds like a lot, but I'm really looking at some options that are less expensive. Whenever you get into the brand new books, the newest things, those absolutely do have some of the latest research and some of the most up-to-date information that you can imagine, but they also cost an arm and a leg, $30, $40, $50. If you get into something that's just slightly older, that's just not completely out of date, but still a helpful resource, you get into a little bit of less expensive territory. And so I want to share some resources that are still excellent and some ones that are still very much up to date that won't just kill you along the way. You can kind of piece these things together over time. Now, the very first thing on the list is actually a Bible. And I want to talk about different English translations because they're not all created the same. English Bible translations have one kind of different philosophies, and those who translate are either dynamic equivalence or formal equivalence. Dynamic equivalence is trying to give you just a thought for thought. Not exactly every little word, like a one word for one word correspondence, but pretty specifically the thought for thought thing, which is often word for word, okay? Thought for thought does not lack word for word. It's just not constantly trying to give you that. That's dynamic equivalence. That's a New International Version. That's a New Revised Standard Version. You know, there's a lot of good versions in that would really fit that bill. You don't need to spend a ton of money on that. Now, if you don't want to buy a ton of commentaries, you know, you like want to really scale back, get a good study Bible at first. Get the New Oxford Annotated New Revised Standard Version. Maybe go like one edition back, so you're not paying for the brand new one, just paying out just some crazy number for just, you know, a little bit of an update. Then there's formal equivalence. Formal equivalence is more like word for word. There's no perfect word for word translation. It would be too clunky. It'd be too choppy. It wouldn't sound right. Some words have different shades of meaning that need different words to translate them. But like a New American Standard is a good, solid word for word, you know, formal equivalent translation. So my recommendation is this: get an inexpensive New American Standard, get an inexpensive New Revised Standard, or depending on your church, if most people are in the NIV, you want people to be hearing the same words they're seeing. And so that way they're not getting confused. They're not, as you're preaching, teaching, having to go along and like figure things out of where in the world are you. So one thing is to think about, what do most people in the pew have? But probably an NIV, maybe ESV, maybe New American Standard, but just find that out. Maybe New King James, you know, find that out and pretty much roll with that, unless you just can't. And then get one of each. You want a formal equivalence, you want a dynamic equivalence, because that's going to help you as you study get into some of the things that are going on in the text that are really going to help you get more specific. Especially if you don't know the original languages, that's a real help. And you can do this for $20, $30 to get two decent translations, probably actually less than that. You probably already have them lying around somewhere. So let's start with Bible dictionaries. Now, the standard Bible dictionary that's been around since the early 90s is the Anchor Bible Dictionary. This is like a $600 to $800 set, but now it's 20, 30 years old. You know, we're kind of moving on into some other areas, but no one's really been as thorough as that. It's like 6 volumes, I forget how many thousand, 7,000 pages or something. You know, look for something simple. Look for a 1 volume, something like the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Dictionary. You know, just something that's simple, something that's concise, to the point, but will kind of get you there. That's a start, a Bible dictionary. After we get past the Bible and after we get past Bible dictionaries, we're going into like the Old Testament, and we're going to go straight to Old Testament theology. And the book I'm going to recommend for Old Testament theology is Walter Brueggemann's Old Testament Theology. This is getting a little bit dated, but the price is coming down. It's only about $9 on Amazon for a hardcover used. Again, look at used books. Don't go for the new books unless they're the same price. That's going to be a really good Old Testament theology. If you want to spend more money on that, go with John Goldingay's 3-volume Old Testament theology. It's excellent, very expensive. They're $40 a piece. There's 3 of them, $120 plus to get that put together. The next thing you're going to need is an introduction to the Old Testament. The Zondervan one by Dillard and Longman, they're going to talk about backgrounds. They're going to talk about who they think the author is. They're going to talk about the date of writing. They're going to talk about the latest, at that time, now several years old, scholarship. They're going to talk about themes. They're going to just give you the gist of every book of the Old Testament. The next thing you want to get into is a systematic theology. There are a lot of these. What a systematic theology does is it tries to give like one thread that kind of ties the biblical narrative together. And my favorite in that is Stanley Grinz's Theology for the Community of God. It is well thought out. You'll be blessed by that work. Now we get into the commentaries. Now this can get really, really expensive really, really fast. Old Testament commentaries, My very favorite series, but pricey series, is the New International Commentary on the Old Testament, the NICOT. Those can be $20, $30, $40 a piece. Some have 2 volumes. You're looking at Genesis volume 1 and 2. You're looking at Isaiah volume 1 and 2. You know, you may be in at $75, $80 for that. That's a lot. You know, there is F.F. Bruce's commentary to the whole Bible. I think that's like $4 online. It's pretty good. It's a one-person gig. Maybe he may have edited that, and it's just a few dollars. That's kind of worth getting. You know, if you just want to get one thing that kind of covers the whole Bible, it's probably as good as you're going to get. Robert Alter's work is really good. It's not straight commentary, and it gets into the original languages quite a bit, but it gives you just interesting bits and pieces of information along the way. To see the description for links to all of this. John Goldingay's Old Testament for Everyone series. He's got most of the Old Testament covered, and those are like $9, $10, $12. Again, now over, you know, about 39 books, that's going to add up to quite a bit. Look at the NIV Application Commentary series. Some of those are $5, $6, $7, $8. Sometimes they're on sale on Kindle for $4.99. Look also at the Interpretation Commentary series. Those are usually $8 to $14. Maybe Exodus, I think, is $19.99. There's a few that cost a little bit more, maybe Joshua or Judges. Practical, simple, doesn't require a lot of knowledge of original languages, but cheap, simple, practical for preaching and teaching, just general study. You will love that. That will fill the bill. Now let's move into the New Testament. Let's start with a introduction to the New Testament. Carson, Moo, and Morris. This is D.A. Carson, Leon Morris, and Douglas Moo. Who is the author? What do scholars say who the author is? The date of composition, themes of the book. They'll work you through some of the best scholarship on each book of the New Testament. Must-have book, inexpensive book. I want to say it's like $12 or something like that. I don't remember the exact amount, but it doesn't cost much. There is an older edition too. You can go back to that. Probably cost almost nothing on Amazon, but will be less up to date. How about a New Testament theology? There are some pricey ones. There are some awesome ones. There is the one from Schreiner. There is the one from I. Howard Marshall. But they're $30 to $40 to $50. You know, if you step back a generation and go to George Eldon Ladd, dated, it's $5. It's still good material. You know, just look at it, start with it. It's a place to start. Now we get into New Testament commentaries. On the high end, the pricey end, we're talking New International Commentary of the New Testament, but those are $20, $30, $40, $50. You can get into Baker Exegetical. Both of those require knowledges of Greek and Hebrew and those sorts of things. But, you know, you really want to look at Tom Wright, N.T. Wright's New Testament for Everyone, Paul for Everyone, Matthew for Everyone, John for Everyone. They're $8 to $12 once again. You can buy the whole set for the whole New Testament for like $189 or something along those lines. Very applicable, simple, well-written illustration with every section, some good rich theology that he draws from. You'll never go wrong with it. Again, interpretation series, commentary series, and the NIV application commentary series. You can't go wrong with any of that. And again, they're not really all that expensive. And again, if you go to an older set, an older series, like if you go to the Word series, and sometimes the very best commentaries are just one-off commentaries and random series. So if you have a question about a particular book of the Old or New Testament and you want to know what's the best commentary, go to bestcommentaries.com and look, but you can also ask in the comments. And then there are the historical background books. There are books that connect the Old Testament and the New Testament. There are a lot of books that give you rich history of how the Old Testament influences the New Testament, so that when you read the New Testament, you get the full flavor of what's really going on. There are books like The Jewish Backgrounds of the New Testament by Scott. There are books like Our Father Abraham by Wilson. There are some really deep, rich theological books, and those are fairly inexpensive. These are coming down in price, these next couple, but are still a little bit higher, maybe in the teens, $20 range, are the Christian Origin series by N.T. Wright. Those are all great resources that offer rich theology, rich history, and connections in the Old and New Testament that I think you'll find very, very helpful. And last, there are the original languages. I would recommend Dan Wallace's book on Beyond the Basics of Greek Grammar. It's a little bit stout, but his examples are amazing. His scripture reference index in the back is amazing, extremely helpful. I've used it many times. You're going to want to get a Greek New Testament. You're going to want to get a Hebrew Old Testament at some point if you get into the languages. Hebrew Old Testament, Biblica, Hebraica, Stuttgartensia, it's about $40. There's a 4th or 5th edition version that's $27. I'll put a link to that in the description. But, you know, that's essential if you're going to get into the original languages. A lot of that now is also online for free. Then there's also the New Testament. You can download, if you have Logos, the SBL Greek New Testament for free. Excellent resource, zero cost. You know, you can even download Logos as a free reader without paying for it. And you don't get all the bells and whistles, but you can read stuff and download SBL Greek New Testament for free, zero cost to have a Greek New Testament in your hands. Or you can buy United Bible Society's Greek New Testament. Now they're at the 5th edition. I forget what it runs, 20 some odd, 30 some odd dollars. One edition back, the 4th edition, it's like $5 on Amazon. We'll put a link to that in the description. But these are some things that can help you get going. $5 Greek New Testament, free Greek New Testament, things that are just a little bit less expensive. The interpretation series of commentaries, $8, $9, $10 a piece. Again, we got 66 books of the Bible. That could be $600 over time. Like, I get that it's expensive, and so we want to cut as many corners as possible as we're kind of putting these things together. And so that's why I'm pointing you to some things that are less expensive. And maybe it takes you a year or two to at least get the basics put together. We're going to talk in another video about like just a really basic, like if you had $100 to spend, where would you start? We'll talk about spiritual and devotional reading, some recommendations on that. We'll talk about church leadership and ministry books, some of the best practices in that, discipleship, some of the best books in that. We're just going to keep talking about some of these things over a couple videos, half a dozen videos or less. And so thank you for watching. Put in the comments your recommendations. Let the watchers, the viewers know like what you think is best. And by the way, please subscribe. We would love if you would subscribe. We're going to keep talking about these things, keep equipping, keep resourcing.